Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have CFPB announces rule limiting bank overdraft fees from CNBC.com by Patam 13. And, I personally think, the government shouldn't be telling private businesses what they can and can't do, and that includes bad stuff like overdraft fees. I personally don't really care for them, but I think if a private company wants to be able to do them, then they should be able to do them. I don't think the government should be telling private companies what their own rules should be. And that's my thoughts on that issue. The next we have puberty blockers to be banned indefinitely for under 18s across the UK from TheGuardian.com by Doctor Who 07. And yeah, I personally don't think kids should be taking puberty blockers for non-medically necessary reasons, and I think that's a lot of what transgenderism is. I think that's very more of a psychological thing than a biologically necessary thing. And yeah, so I personally would agree with this ban. But with that being said, I do think the government shouldn't be telling people what drugs they can and can't take, and that includes children. So I think if children do want to take puberty blockers and have their parents' permission, I don't think the government should be telling the children what they can and can't do. And that's my thoughts on that issue. I personally don't believe they can consent to things like puberty blockers or the top or bottom surgery, but ultimately it comes down to what each person's willing to justify. And that's my thoughts there. Then we have Trump backtracks on campaign pledge to bring down grocery prices from HuffPost.com by Donald Key. And I personally don't really know if he can control the market like that. Hopefully the grocery prices will go down and inflation will go down, but ultimately the president doesn't control the economy. And this is just another hit piece against Trump, I would say. I don't really like the guy, but Reddit's pretty much all just hit pieces against him from stuff like HuffPost, The Atlantic, etc., etc. I said earlier on Twitter that the Atlantic belongs under its namesake oceans, and truthfully, all of the legacy media belongs under the Atlantic Ocean. Not that I would force them there, but that's where they deserve to be. And that's why I think it's increasingly good how the people control the media through social media rather than the megacorps like stuff like the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, all them. Increasingly, the people control the media and not. And it's interesting how a lot of people on the DNC left say, "Oh, I hate big business and big corporations," yet they always bend over backwards when it comes to the big media, the big traditional alphabet media, I would say. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Southwest Airlines lawsuit could be a new playbook for DEI litigation moving forward from Fortune.com by Ninja Lover, and they added, for years, Southwest Airlines has run a special program to assist Hispanic college students living far from home. It's called Lanzante or Takeoff, and it gives a select number of Hispanic students free flights to visit their families as they pursued their studies, or the chance for their parents to visit them in turn. And I personally think if a company wants to do that, I think it should be able to do so. But I don't think a company should be forced to not do anything it doesn't want to do. And that's what I feel like DEI is pretty much enforced by the government. Same with ESG. Companies are really forced to be socially progressive in order for government benefits and subsidies. And that's why I think we just got to get government out of private business, because they can push these progressive agendas onto companies, and companies will be more or less forced to comply. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Lakeland woman threatens insurance company, says delay denied to police from WFLA.com by Frosty Slowman. And I personally don't really care for threats. I think they're cheap talk, but I've consistently said that threats are free speech, regardless of what is the political perspective of the person saying them is. So I don't think she should have gone to jail or prison over this. I think it's a free speech thing, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have 10 worst federal laws. How many are we likely to recreate soon? That's from Mr. Beat on YouTube, posted by Patam 13. I think I posted this subreddit a few months ago before I got banned. But the U.S. definitely has had a lot of authoritarian laws in its past. And yeah, I like what they said. Yeah, and it's definitely important to call the U.S. government out on it. And it's regardless of the party in power who passes the laws. You know, a lot of Reddit says it hates authoritarianism, but it almost always just only means right authoritarianism. It almost always justifies blue authoritarianism or sweeps it under the rug. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Meta donates $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund from APnews.com by Ninja Lover. And yeah, I personally wouldn't want to donate to Trump's inauguration fund, but if Zuckerberg wants to donate to Trump's inauguration fund, I think he should be able to do so. You know, it's interesting. You know, when a rich person gives money to the Republicans, it's all over the front page of Reddit. But when a rich person like George Soros or Piero Midyar gives money to the Democrats, it's almost nowhere to be found. And it's interesting because Kamala got more donations from the rich than Trump did, but you'd never hear Reddit call her out on that. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. You know, the left loves billionaires when they play on their team. Just look at how a lot of DNC shows love the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, even though he's has more in total assets than Trump. Next, we have Las Vegas bikini model forced to show genitals after Morocco arrests officers suspect she's trans. And then in parentheses, they add genital inspections coming soon to every bathroom in conservative America. And that's from themirror.com by CH4Locks, and that's crosswords from the Not the Onion subreddit. And yeah, I personally don't think people should be forced to show their genitals if they don't want to. But that being said, I think if the state isn't in a position to force people to do whatever it wants since they have the monopoly on the legal use of force. Now, I personally don't really care for general inspections, but if the state wants to do that, ultimately it's them. And yeah, it's interesting how they said it's happened in Morocco. Yeah, it's already being used to say Republicans bad, and that's pretty much all Reddit is all just Republicans bad. Even if it's something that happens in like Morocco or Iraq, it's still going to be used to say Republicans bad. Now, I personally don't care for Republicans. I think they're just Democrats from 10 years ago, but Reddit's just increasingly all just DNC propaganda gobbledygook, as I said in the last episode. Then we have Florida law enforcement raid reptile facility, massacre pythons with a nail gun, and kill someone else's pet boa constrictor from NBCMiami.com by LegioX. And yeah, I personally don't think that's very good or libertarian. I think if people want to own exotic animals, I think they should be able to do so, and they shouldn't need a permit for them either. I don't think you should need government permission to do anything, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have many outrage after President Biden commutes ex-Dixon comptroller Reader Cromwell's sentence, and that's the YouTube video from CBS News Chicago posted by Chunky Lover 92. And yeah, I think if but Biden did pardon all those people, and Reddit was saying it was a good thing, but now it looks like he's pardoning some bad people like Reader Cromwell. Ultimately, the president should be able to pardon whoever he wants to. I'm glad Reddit's calling me out for pardoning a not good person. Normally, they wouldn't call this out when a Democrat does it, but I'm glad Reddit's calling out Democrats pardoning one of their own, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have RFK Jr. advisor petition regulators to revoke approval of polio vaccine from TheGuardian.com by Tom 13. And they added, I guess the Make America Healthy Again return date is at least 90 years ago. And yeah, this is just kind of another example of Reddit DNC rage bait. The key advisor was working as a lawyer for another group called ICANN. This was 2 years ago. And, I personally think if people don't want to take the polio vaccine, they shouldn't be forced to do so. But I think, ultimately, it should be an individual choice. And, if certain groups want to revoke accreditation of the polio vaccine, I think they should be able to do so. But yeah, this is just kind of DNC propaganda rage bait because RFK Jr. is bad now because he's in Trump's cabinet. And yeah, I personally do think this is overly authoritarian. I think the root of the problem is that we have government approved medicines at all. I think the medicine should truly be a free market. Anyone should be able to take whatever medication they want, and the government shouldn't be approving or denying people's ability to use anything they want to. And that's my thoughts on that issue. I personally don't think you should be out in the street tripping out on drugs all day, but, that's your choice, not mine. Then we have Donald Trump changes his tune on Project 2025, very conservative and very good, from Newsweek.com posted by Ninja Lover, and that's another DNC propaganda hit piece. And yeah, I personally don't think Project 2025 is that realistic, but it's just the current narrative. There wasn't, where was Project 2017 during Trump's first term? They had a mandate for leaders for that year as well, but that wasn't the narrative back then. So yeah, I think that's what we need to. You always have to remember what's the narrative rather than and what are people currently pushing. Yeah, so I think Project 2025 is pretty much a nothing burger, and I think they'll be lucky to get most of the page of it passed. But yeah, for Reddit, it's like might as well be Hitler's final solution. Then we have, surprise, key witness reveals he lied about Biden corruption, from NewRepublic.com by Ninja Lover, and this is another DNC propaganda hit piece, because Hunter Biden didn't just end up on the board of Burisma and get a blanket pardon for all his actions in the past 10 years because of the gun stuff. There is some shady stuff going on with Hunter Biden and his father's involvement in his corruption. And yeah, but according to Reddit, you can't call that out because Biden's on their team, and they're always say, "Oh, Trump's corrupt," but they don't care about Biden's corruption at all because he has the right letter next to his name, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Senator Rand Paul introduces bipartisan bill that will provide due process protections to property owners, from KentuckyToday.com by Ninja Lover. And they said U.S. Senator Rand Paul, R. Bowling Green, has joined with Senator Cory Booker, New Jersey, to introduce the bipartisan Fifth Amendment Integrity Restoration Fair Act, aimed at reforming civil forfeiture laws and protecting Americans' rights from government abuse. The government should not have the power to seize a person's property without due process, said Paul. Yet under current civil asset forfeiture laws, Americans are being stripped on their property without ever being charged or convicted of a crime. The Fair Act directly addresses these injustices and is a critical step toward restoring fairness and accountability, protecting property owners' rights, and the curbing of the weaponization of civil forfeiture laws once and for all. And yeah, I think that's good. Normally Reddit's pretty against Rand Paul, but because he has an R next to his name. But you do see. Occasionally, I guess, I do have this an article like this, which might praise him, but this is like searching for a needle in a haystack. It's very much the exception rather than the rule when Republicans gets praised. Then we have appeals court permanently injuring a 13-year-old because he wouldn't take his hand out of his pockets isn't a rights violation, from TechDirt.com by Paton13, and that's of course was from the Bad Cop No Donut subreddit. And yeah, I personally do think that would be a rights violation, but ultimately the states was ultimately in the position to decide what's right and wrong, and that's personally why I don't think they should be in that position. Then we have the battle of libertarian sharks versus the authoritarian conservation committee of Hackney, and that's from Paton13. That's a YouTube video from CGP Grey, and they added this incredibly amusing video about how a libertarian art group used the installation of fiberglass sharks really absurdly essentially planning zoning regulations. And I would agree with that. I think zoning is very bad and authoritarian. I think people should be able to place whatever they want wherever they want to. I don't think the government should be telling them where they can and can't do stuff. And that's my thoughts on that issue. I personally wouldn't want people tripping out on drugs on my property, but if they want to justify being on my property and tripping out on drugs, I think they should be able to do so. And if I want to justify kicking them out, I should be able to do so as well. And that's my thoughts there. Then we have South Korea impeaches president after martial law ploy by Paton13. That's crossword from the political humor subreddit, and it's that meme from The Simpsons. That's the handle of authoritarianism, and the father says South Korea labels South Korea, and he's smacking his son labeled USA. And yeah, I do think it's good that they're impeaching him for his authoritarian impulse of declaring martial law. But with that being said, in the U.S., people will just justify their own party's authoritarianism while saying that the other party's authoritarianism is the worst thing ever. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Texas sues New York doctor for telemedicine prescription of abortion pills, from NBCNews.com by Swampanky Dan. And yeah, I personally am more on the pro-choice side. I personally, I'd love to be pro-life, but I think it's a bodily autonomy issue. So I think if people do if someone does want to provide abortion pill, they need to be able to do so. But I think it's an individual choice of what drugs people want to take, rather than the state's choice of what drugs people want to take. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have American Wealth Inequality visualizes grains of rice, from Swamp Hanky Dan. That's crosswords from the Interesting as Fuck subreddit. And yeah, I definitely do think America has some wealth inequality problems, but that's the natural result of society. Not everyone can be equal. When you attempt to make everyone equal, that's just going to be result in communism. And look at how that turns out when you get people like Stalin and Mao, and even worse authoritarianism than the U.S. has currently. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have new Texas GOP rule could add more chaos to speakers race from the Texas Tribune by from CL 563, and they had last week the Republican Party of Texas implied would censure any GOP Texas House member who does not vote for Representative David Cook as Speaker under new party rules. They would bar those lawmakers from running Republican primaries for 2 years. And yeah, I personally think that's overly authoritarian. I think people should be able to vote for however they feel like without fearing getting censored. But that being said, Reddit would also act like when the national GOP takes 15 ballots to choose a Speaker of the House, that's the worst thing ever as well. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're right, if they say, oh, the Republican Party say, oh, you have to pick this guy Speaker, it's suddenly it's horrible authoritarianism. But if the Republican Party takes like 20 ballots to select a Speaker, then suddenly that's bad as well. So Reddit's just going to criticize the Republican Party regardless of what they do, even if it might be on the exact opposite end of the spectrum of what they previously did. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And yeah, I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.